Ikaw ba ay isang rehistradong botante para sa May 9, 2022 elections? Narito ang 12 bagay na hindi mo dapat gawin bago, sa araw mismo at pagkatapos ng eleksyon batay sa Omnibus Election Code at sa mga panuntunan ng Commission on Elections. Huwag ibenta ang iyong boto. Ang pagbili ng boto o pagbenta ng boto ay mahigpit na ipinagbabawal sa ilalim ng Omnibus Election Code. Ito ay may kaukulang parusa ng pagkakakulong mula 1 hanggang 6 na taon, pagkadiskwalipika sa pagsilbi sa isang pampublikong posisyon at pagkawala ng karapatang bumoto. Ang isang partidong politikal na mapapatunayang bumili o nagbenta ng boto ay pamumultahin na hindi bababa sa 10,000 piso. Huwag pagpustahan ang resulta ng eleksyon. Ang kahit na anong pera o bagay na may halaga na itinaya sa pustahan para sa resulta ng eleksyon ay mapupunta sa estado. Huwag pilitin o takutin ang iyong mga subordinates, kabilang ang mga miyembro ng parokya o simbahan, mga kasambahay, o mga nangungupahan para ikampanya o iboto o hindi iboto ang isang kandidato. Huwag pilitin o takutin sa direkta o hindi direktang paraan ang kahit na sinong opisyal o kawani para sa eleksyon. Huwag magdala ng baril sa labas ng iyong bahay o lugar ng trabaho. Kahit na ikaw ang may permit to carry, kailangan mo pa rin ng sulat mula sa COMELEC na nagsasaad na ikaw ay maaaring magbitbit ng baril sa labas. Huwag bumoto ng higit sa isang beses sa isang eleksyon. Huwag bumoto kung ikaw ay hindi rehistradong botante. Ang double voting o mas kilala sa tawag na flying voter ay may kaukulang parusa ng pagkabilanggo ng hanggang 6 na taon at multa na hanggang 10,000 piso. Huwag bumoto bilang kahalili ng isang rehistradong botante kahit pa may pahintulot. Huwag gumamit ng ibang balota maliban sa ibibigay ng Board of Election Inspectors. Ipinagbabawal din ang pagkakaroon ng higit sa isang official ballot. Huwag picturan ang iyong balota. Hindi rin pinapayagan ang mag-selfie kasama ng iyong balota. Huwag magbitbit ng nakamamatay na armas sa loob ng presinto kung saan ka boboto at sa loob ng radius na 100 metro mula sa presinto sa araw ng eleksyon. Huwag magbenta, mag-alok, bumili, maghain, o kumuha ng alak at iba pang nakakalasing ng inumin 1 araw bago ang eleksyon at sa mismong araw ng eleksyon. Ang mga hotels at establisimento lamang na pinapayagan ng Department of Tourism na magsilbi ng alak sa mga dayuhang turista ang maaaring di masaklawan ng liquor ban. Huwag magdaos o makilahok sa sabong, boxing, karera ng kabayo, hay-alay at iba pang kahalintulad na laro sa araw ng eleksyon. Bawat boto ay mahalaga at ang isang boto ay maaaring magresulta sa 6 na taon na maayos na pamamalakad ng gobyerno at matatag na ekonomiya o 6 na taon na talamak ang korupsyon, mataas ang porsyento ng mga walang trabaho at mas laganap na kahirapan. Protektahan mo ang iyong kinabukasan sa pamamagitan ng hindi pagbenta ng iyong boto. Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. Painit ng painit ang nalalapit na eleksyon. Pero hindi dapat kalimutan na tayo ay nasa gitna pa ng pandemya at may mga nagsusulputang variants ng COVID-19 na posibleng mas malala. Pakikipagkamay, beso-beso, selfies, may mahigpit na paalala si Commission on Election spokesman James Jimenez.
Well, napakahalaga kasi no na panatiliin nating ang seguridad ng ating mga mamamayan. Alam naman natin na during the campaign period, talagang ang posibleng tamaan ng COVID, no, dahil dito nga sa ongoing na pandemic natin, ay hindi naman yung mga kandidato o yung kanilang mga campaign staff, kundi yung mga taong nag-a-attend sa kanilang mga rally. Kaya napakahalaga na pangalagaan natin ang kanilang kalusugan. And this responsibility falls squarely on the shoulders of the candidates and their campaign teams.
Narito ang mga panuntunang itinakda ng COMELEC sa ilalim ng Resolution number 10732 kung paano matitiyak na ang mga campaign activities para sa May 9, 2022 na eleksyon ay hindi maging COVID super spreader events. Lahat ng kandidato at kanilang mga campaign support staff ay itinuturing na authorized persons outside of residence or APOR kahit ano paman ang alert level system at kanilang vaccination status. Ang face-to-face sorties, rallies, conventions, motorcades, caravans at meeting de avance ay pinapayagan lamang sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng alert levels 1, 2 at 3. Ang mga batang may edad 17 pababa at mga nakatatandang may edad 66 pataas at ang may mga kondisyong medikal, kabilang na ang mga buntis, ay bawal dumalo sa mga ganitong aktibidad.
At huwag nating kakalimutan yung mga selfie, mga pagkamay-kamay, pagyakap-yakap, beso-beso. Saglit lang yan. No? Wala pang ilang segundo yan, tapos na yan, lumipas na. Pero pag kayo ay nagkasakit, dahil dyan, pag kayo ay nagka-COVID, mahabang gamutan yan, mahabang bubunuin ng inyong kalusugan yan, at hindi lang yan, pati ng inyong finances. Napakamahal magkasakit ngayon. So, wag nating isasang-alang sa kakunting enjoyment yung mas mahabang problema ng COVID.
Ang indoor campaign ay hindi pinapayagan sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng Alert Level 4. Mga outdoor na aktibidad lamang na nasa 30% capacity ang pinapayagan. Kahit na anong meeting, convention, rally, motorcade, caravan o meeting de avance ay hindi pinapayagan sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng Alert Level 5. Ang mga kandidato o ang kanilang mga campaign support staff ay pinagbabawalang gawin ang mga sumusunod. Huwag pumasok sa pribadong pamamahay habang nagsasagawa ng house-to-house campaign kahit pa pumayag ang may-ari ng bahay. Bawal ang pakipagkamay, pagyakap, beso-beso, o kahit na anong physical contact sa kandidato o mga kasama nila at sa publiko. Bawal ang makipag-selfie o pagkuha ng litrato na lalabag sa social distancing protocols. Bawal mamahagi ng pagkain o inumin upang maiwasang magtanggal ng face mask ang mga tao.
Ang ating kalusugan at kasiguruhan sa panahon ng pandemya ay nakasalalay sa individual na pananagutan or individual responsibility. Kailangan tayo maging responsible tayo sa sarili nating mga gawa. Kung tayo ay mag-behave in a safe manner, magiging safe tayo lahat. Kung tayo mismo ang lalabag sa mga protocols na itinakda ng ating health authorities, talagang tataas ang tsansa ng infection, no, in our population. So, kailangan doon sa mga botante, doon sa mga nanunood ng mga rally, kayo mismo, magkusa kayo na huwag ninyong gagawin yan.
Tandaan, ang paglabag sa mga health protocols sa mga aktibidad na may kinalaman sa eleksyon ay itinuturing na election offense. Ang mga lalabag sa panuntunang itinakda ay nahaharap sa hanggang 6 na taong pagkabilanggo at multa na hindi bababa sa 10,000 piso. Maaari ding mawala ang karapatang bumoto pag ikaw ay nahatulang guilty sa paglabag sa mga protocols. Tunay na mahirap ang pangangampanya para sa eleksyon, pero sa gitna ng patuloy na public health crisis, ito ay higit pang naging masalimuot. Ang mga kandidato, ang kanilang campaign staff, at ang publiko ay marapat na piliin lagi ang kaligtasan at kalusugan una sa lahat. Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. Kung ikaw ay nakakita ng aktibidad na lumalabag sa mga naturang panuntunan sa iyong lugar, huwag mag-atubiling magsumbong sa COMELEC sa kanilang Facebook, Twitter at mobile.
Nagkainit ang eleksyon, pero dili nato kalimtan nga anaa pa kita sa tunga sa pandemya ug aduna pay bag-o ug mas mapintas nga variant sa COVID-19. Paglamano, paghalok, selfies, ang tingpamapa sa Commission on Elections nga si James Jimenez adunay istrikto nga pahinumdum.
Well, napakahalaga kasi no na panatiliin nating ang seguridad ng ating mga mamamayan. Alam naman natin na during the campaign period, talagang ang posibleng tamaan ng COVID, no, dahil dito nga sa ongoing na pandemic natin, ay hindi naman yung mga kandidato o yung kanilang mga campaign staff, kundi yung mga taong nag-a-attend sa kanilang mga rally. Kaya napakahalaga na pangalagaan natin ang kanilang kalusugan. And this responsibility falls squarely on the shoulders of the candidates and their campaign teams.
Aniya ang mga giya nga gitagda sa COMELEC ilalom sa Resolution number 10732. Kung unsaon pagsiguro nga ang mga aktibidades sa kampanya para sa May 9, 2022 nga national ug lokal nga eleksyon dili mamahimong pamaagi kung diin mukaylap ang COVID. Ang mga kandidato ug ang ilang mga tigpaluyo ang mga ginakonsidera nga authorized persons outside of residence or APOR, bisan pa kung unsa ang alert level system o estado sa bakuna. Gitugutan ang atubangay nga mga sortie, rally, convention, motorcade, caravan ug meeting de avance apan sa mga lugar lang nga gipailalom sa alert levels 1, 2 ug 3. Bisan pa niana, ang mga tawo nga ubos sa 18 ug labaw sa 65 ang edad, apil na ang mga adunay mga pinahiping sakit ug mga buntis, dili tugutan nga moapil ni ining mga aktibidades.
At huwag nating kakalimutan yung mga selfie, mga pagkamay-kamay, pagyakap-yakap, beso-beso. Saglit lang yan. No? Wala pang ilang segundo yan, tapos na yan, lumipas na. Pero pag kayo ay nagkasakit, dahil dyan, pag kayo ay nagka-COVID, mahabang gamutan yan, mahabang bubunuin ng inyong kalusugan yan. At hindi lang yan, pati ng inyong finances. Napakamahal magkasakit ngayon. So, wag nating isasang-alang sa kakunting enjoyment yung mas mahabang problema ng COVID.
Wala ginatugutan ang mga kampanya sa sulod sa mga venue sa mga lugar ilalom sa Alert Level 4. Ang mga aktibidades lamang nga anaa sa gawas ug 30% lamang ang kapasidad nga gitugutan. Ang bisan unsang meeting, convention, rally, motorcade, caravan ug meeting di avance, wala gitugutan sa mga lugar ilalom sa Alert Level 5. Ang mga kandidato ug ang ilang mga tigpaluyo sa kampanya, wala gitugutan nga bubuhat sa mga musunod. Ayaw pagsulod sa pribadong balay sa panahon sa house-to-house nga kampanya, bisan pa gitugutan kini sa tagbalay. Walay paglamano, paggakos, paghalok, o bisan unsang pamaaging pisikal nga kontak, tiliwala sa mga kandidato sa ilang mga kauban ug sa publiko. Walay selfies o hulagway nga nagkinahanglan sa mga kandidato sa ilang mga kauban ug sa publiko nga mulapas sa protocol sa social distancing. Walay pag-apod-apod ug pagkaon ug ilimnon aron malikayan nga magtanggal ang mga tawo sa ilang face mask.
Ang ating kalusugan at kasiguruhan sa panahon ng pandemya ay nakasalalay sa individual na pananagutan or individual responsibility. Kailangan tayo maging responsible tayo sa sarili nating mga gawa. Kung tayo ay magbibehave in a safe manner, magiging safe tayo lahat. kung tayo mismo ang lalabag sa mga protocols na itinakda ng ating health authorities, talagang tataas ang tsansa ng infection, no, in our population. So, kailangan doon sa mga botante, doon sa mga nanonood ng mga rally, kayo mismo, magkusa kayo na huwag ninyong gagawin yan.
Hinumdumi. Ang paglapas sa health protocols sa panahon sa mga aktibidades sa eleksyon, ginakonsidera pod nga paglapas sa eleksyon. Ang mga mulapas sa mga giya, mag-atubang og pinakataas nga 9 katuig nga pagkapriso ug pinakagamay nga multa nga 10,000. Ang sad-an, mawad-an og katungod sa pagboto. Lisod ang kampanya sa eleksyon, bag-o pa man ang pandemya, ug sa tunga sa kasamtangang pampublikong krisis sa panglawas, nahimo pa kining mas lisod. Lisod ang kampanya sa eleksyon, bag-o pa man ang pandemya, ug sa tunga sa kasamtangang pampublikong krisis sa panglawas, nahimo pa kining mas lisod. Apan ang mga politiko, ang ilang mga tagapaluyo sa kampanya, ug ang publiko, nanginahanglan nga mopili una sa kaluwasan. Hinumdumi, ayaw kahadlok sa pagboto, ug pagboto nga maalamon. Kung aduna kay nasaksihan nga aktibidades sa eleksyon nga nilapas sa mga nahisgutan nga mga giya sa inyong lugar, ayaw pagduha-duha sa pagsumbong niini sa COMELEC, pinaagi sa ilang Facebook, Twitter, o mobile.
Kada eleksyon, pumipili ang sambayanang Pilipino ng susunod na lider ng bansa, ng taong magtatakda ng plano at polisiya para sa 6 na taon ng ating kinabukasan. Pero ano nga ba ang hinahanap natin sa isang leader? Sa anong mga kwalifikasyon natin titimbangin ang mga kandidatong nanliligaw para sa matamis nating boto?
Dapat ang leader natin matapang, walang uurungan.
Ang gusto kong kandidato ay yung magaling sumayaw at entertaining.
Gusto ko yung matikas, yung magaling magdala ng sarili.
Sana yung susunod na presidente mayaman na para hindi na mangurakot.
Alam mo bang base sa ating konstitusyon, 5 lang ang kwalifikasyon para sa mga nagnanais tumakbong presidente ng Pilipinas? Una, kailangan natural-born citizen ng Pilipinas. Ikalawa, kailangang rehistradong botante. Ikatlo, marunong bumasa at magsulat. Ika-4, nasa edad na 40 sa araw ng eleksyon. At ika-5, residente ng Pilipinas sa loob ng 10 taon bago ang eleksyon. Simple, hindi ba? Walang itinatakdang kwalifikasyon base sa edukasyon, work experience o kayamanan. Pero simple nga bang tunay ang mga dapat nating hanapin sa susunod na leader ng ating bansa? Ayon kay Commission on Elections spokesperson James Jimenez, marami pa tayong pwede at dapat hanapin.
Very basic o payak ang ating requirements. Ibig ba sabihin nito na yan lang ang kailangan nating hanapin? Siyempre hindi. Yan ang tinatawag nating minimum. Pwede kang maghanap ng mas lampas pa dyan. No? Halimbawa, maghanap ka ng taong merong integridad. Gawin mong necessary ingredient yan. Gawin mong kalakip yan ng pagpili mo kung sino magiging pangulo. Kailangan may integridad, kailangan may kakayanan, kailangan magaling, kailangan matalino, at kailangan nagsasabi ng katotohanan sa bayan. Kasi ang pipiliin natin ay hindi lang basta-bastang tao. Leader natin ang pipiliin natin. Leader natin na bibigyan natin ng napakalaking kapangyarihan. Kapangyarihan over our lives, over our livelihoods, over our country. So, bagaman maliit or payak lamang ang requirements ng konstitusyon, kailangan tayo bilang botante, pag boboto na tayo, kailangan medyo mas mataas naman ang standards natin.
Tunay na marami tayong dapat hanapin na katangian sa susunod na leader ng bayan. Ngayon, higit kailanman, kailangan nating maging mapanuri.
Sa tingin ko bilang botante, kailangan maging mas mapanuri tayo dahil hindi biro ang halalan. Hindi biro ang hinihingi sa atin ng mga kandidatong yan. Gusto nila maging leader natin. Gusto nila magkaroon ng kapangyarihan sa ating kabuhayan, sa ating buhay, sa ating bansa. At dahil dyan, kailangan natin maging mapanuri. Eh kung jowa mo nga lang pinadadaan mo sa butas ng karayom bago mo sagutin, paano pa kaya yung mga elected leaders natin na may tunay na kapangyarihan sa iyo?
Sabi nga ni Director Jimenez, kung kinikilatis nating maigi ang isang potensyal na jowa bago ibigay ang matamis nating oo, mas lalong higit na dapat nating kilatisin ang mga nanliligaw para sa makapangyarihan nating boto.
Hindi pa kami pwedeng bumoto.
Kaya sana pumili kayo ng tama para sa aming kinabukasan.
Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. Ikaw ba ay isang rehistradong botante para sa May 9, 2022 elections? Narito ang 12 bagay na hindi mo dapat gawin bago, sa araw mismo at pagkatapos ng eleksyon batay sa Omnibus Election Code at sa mga panuntunan ng Commission on Elections. Huwag ibenta ang iyong boto. Ang pagbili ng boto o pagbenta ng boto ay mahigpit na ipinagbabawal sa ilalim ng Omnibus Election Code. Ito ay may kaukulang parusa ng pagkakakulong mula 1 hanggang 6 na taon, pagkadiskwalipika sa pagsilbi sa isang pampublikong posisyon at pagkawala ng karapatang bumoto. Ang isang partidong politikal na mapapatunayang bumili o nagbenta ng boto ay pamumultahin na hindi bababa sa 10,000 piso. Huwag pagpustahan ang resulta ng eleksyon. Ang kahit na anong pera o bagay na may halaga na itinaya sa pustahan para sa resulta ng eleksyon ay mapupunta sa estado. Huwag pilitin o takutin ang iyong mga subordinates, kabilang ang mga miyembro ng parokya o simbahan, mga kasambahay, o mga nangungupahan para ikampanya o iboto o hindi iboto ang isang kandidato. Huwag pilitin o takutin sa direkta o hindi direktang paraan ang kahit na sinong opisyal o kawani para sa eleksyon. Huwag magdala ng baril sa labas ng iyong bahay o lugar ng trabaho. Kahit na ikaw ang may permit to carry, kailangan mo pa rin ng sulat mula sa COMELEC na nagsasaad na ikaw ay maaaring magbitbit ng baril sa labas. Huwag bumoto ng higit sa 1 beses sa isang eleksyon. Huwag bumoto kung ikaw ay hindi rehistradong botante. Ang double voting o mas kilala sa tawag na flying voter ay may kaukulang parusa ng pagkabilanggo ng hanggang 6 na taon at multa na hanggang 10,000 piso. Huwag bumoto bilang kahalili ng isang rehistradong botante kahit pa may pahintulot. Huwag gumamit ng ibang balota maliban sa ibibigay ng Board of Election Inspectors. Ipinagbabawal din ang pagkakaroon ng higit sa isang official ballot. Huwag picturan ang iyong balota. Hindi rin pinapayagan ang mag-selfie kasama ng iyong balota. Huwag magbitbit ng nakamamatay na armas sa loob ng presinto kung saan ka boboto at sa loob ng radius na 100 metro mula sa presinto sa araw ng eleksyon. Huwag magbenta, mag-alok, bumili, maghain, o kumuha ng alak at iba pang nakakalasing ng inumin isang araw bago ang eleksyon at sa mismong araw ng eleksyon. Ang mga hotels at establishmento lamang na pinapayagan ng Department of Tourism na magsilbi ng alak sa mga dayuhang turista ang maaaring di masaklawan ng liquor ban. Huwag magdaos o makilahok sa sabong, boxing, karera ng kabayo, hay-alay at iba pang kahalintulad na laro sa araw ng eleksyon. Bawat boto ay mahalaga at ang isang boto ay maaaring magresulta sa 6 na taon na maayos na pamamalakad ng gobyerno at matatag na ekonomiya o 6 na taon na talamak ang korupsyon, mataas ang porsyento ng mga walang trabaho at mas laganap na kahirapan. Protektahan mo ang iyong kinabukasan sa pamamagitan ng hindi pagbenta ng iyong boto. Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. and also those who are watching us right now via FB live streaming. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Sana po ay matiwasay ang inyong 2022. We're hoping that everything turns fine this year, ano? At saka manageable lahat despite this pandemic. So welcome everyone to this maiden episode of the monthly roundtable of the Philippine Press Institute, or RTD, supported of course by Seidel Foundation. Wala na pong iba at marami pang activities. We just flashed on screen yung year-round activities namin for 2022 at madami po iyon, ano? At dinagdagan pa natin ng iba pang mga activities. Hopefully we can manage all of them. But sabi nga natin last year, unprecedented yung mga activities ng PPI. Never before seen. Pre-pandemic, mas madami pang nagawa ang PPI during the pandemic, although because, hindi kailangan mag-travel, we get to see everyone in small boxes, pero ganun pa rin, same quality and substantial activities we are going to offer you this year. Again, thanks so much, Seidel Foundation. At ngayon po, mag-umpisa na tayo sa ating roundtable discussion. Magandang hapon po ulit. Bagamat ang dami na nating diniscuss na mga topics last year at marami pa tayong i-discuss this year, isa siguro ang nakaligtaan nating i-discuss itong populasyon natin. Tumaas ba? Bumaba during the pandemic? Busy tayo sa ating mga buhay, kanya-kanyang buhay, tsaka busy tayo sa pagmamonitor ng mga cases, di ba? Nakadepende tayo sa government, sa DOH, at sa other independent monitoring bodies for the cases ng pandemic or ng COVID-19. Pero, ang isang tanong dito is that, ano pa ba yung iba pang mahalagang issues na kailangan nating harapin? Today, or bago pa ito namin na isip na ibigay itong episode na to or yung topic na ito, napag-isipan na namin sa isang planning session natin, baka nga marami pang hindi pa na ibigay yung PPI. So I'm not going to go ahead of the discussion, but at this point, I'd like to call a very good friend. Well, sa lahat ng mga PPI activities natin, andyan po siya. At talagang very supportive siya sa Philippine Press Institute. We are now on the third year of the PPI Seidel Foundation partnership. Please welcome the resident representative of Seidel Foundation to the Philippines, Attorney Guts Heineke. How are you? It's 2022, first month of the year. Attorney Guts?
Yes, thank you very much, Ariel. Good afternoon to everyone. In the past, it was good morning. Now, good afternoon. We changed. I wish you all a very happy year, and I hope you all stayed safe, and you will stay safe. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much to the PPI once again that we start already now on January 19 our activities for the year 2020. It's the first activity as well for the Seidel Foundation. And we are looking forward for a good year together with the PPI, and we will run a lot of activities. I mean, our annual program is quite ambitious. We have the chronicles, we have the roundtable discussions, we have a lot of seminars, international conferences, regional conferences, local conferences. We want to support the digitalization of some local newspapers, 15. What else have I forgotten, Ariel? Podcasts, videos, yes. We really have a quite ambitious program for this year, and I hope you will all enjoy it. And thank you very much for being here this afternoon for the first roundtable of this year. I hope you will like the topic and it's interesting. Having said that, yeah, good afternoon. Let's start. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Guts. Yes, quite a lot of activities this year, pero kayang-kaya natin yan. So kinaya natin yung activities natin last year at we added to the roster this year, but we'll get by and we will manage to successfully conduct all of them. Thanks very much to Seidel Foundation. At this point, last quarter of last year, we experimented on 3 moderators or journalists taking turns to be host and moderator, and they were all successful. This year, we're going to do the same. For this first episode, please welcome PPI Seminar Director, News Editor of Manila Standard, Joyce Pañares. Good afternoon to you, and Happy New Year and Happy Valentine's Day na rin. Advance in February. The floor is yours, Joyce.
Good afternoon, Ariel. Good afternoon to all of our participants, to our resource speakers. Mr. Heineke, good afternoon. Advance Happy Valentine's. That's our forward-looking greeting. I'd like to thank first our friends from the media who joined us today. We're very happy. We have Miss Julie Alipala of the Philippine Daily Inquirer. We have a team from TV5. I think Ryan Ang is here. We have AC Nichols from CNN. We have DZUP. We have Oriel Kilinging of Mindanao Today. And of course, we have Mr. Alex Pal representing Metro Post, from PPI. So yun. Yung discussion natin today will be on the population growth of the Philippines. I remember, Ariel, when the pandemic started, the running joke was that, uy, magkaka-baby boom. Because, everybody, we're all in our houses. We have the time, we have those lockdowns. The common misconception there was that there will be a baby boom. But it was proven false last year.
Pero merong isang joke dyan, Joyce. Oo.
Yung pag wala ng kuryente sa probinsya.
Ng baby boom kung meron namang physical or social distancing inside your house.
Yes. Isa yan sa pag-uusapan natin. Baka physically, it became a bit difficult to procreate because we are all afraid to pass the virus to our loved ones, etc. Maybe it's also psychological. I see Mr. Guts laughing in his Zoom window. So those of us who thought that the pandemic lockdowns would leave couples with little else to do but procreate were in for a surprise. It was not really a baby boom, but a baby bust. The COVID pandemic is serving as a modifier, but not in a way that we expected, or in most of our comedians as well, diba? They made the joke out of the pandemic and the lockdowns and the possible baby boom. So more than a year since the global pandemic struck, its damage to the population growth is starting to become starkly clear. Major economies, from the US to Europe to Asia, we're all experiencing the slowest population growth in generations. So let's just contextualize first before we call our resource speakers. The US, for example, recorded the lowest population growth in history in the first year of the pandemic. I think they only had 390,000 plus babies born from July 2020 to July 2021. So that's the first time that it was lower than 1 million since 1937 in the US. China is also the same. China with the biggest population in this part of the world, or in the entire world. It also fell to its lowest population growth in 6 decades. Diba? And ang malala sa China, what made it worse in China is that the number of people who were born during the pandemic were also almost the same as the number of people who died during the pandemic in China. So 10.14 million deaths as opposed to 10.62 million babies. And that is China with the 3-child policy already. Diba? Dati 1 child, and then they made it into a 2-child policy, and then now it's 3-child policy. But still, the population growth is declining. Dito sa Philippines, mukhang ganun din. Mukhang ganun din ang nangyari sa atin. And it's bad enough, that we kind of joke that in the provinces, when there is no electricity and people have nothing else to do, you'd expect them to procreate, but that is not what happened. And that will be discussed by our resource speakers. We have the Executive Director of the Commission on Population and Development, Undersecretary Jose Perez III, and Dr. Bernadette Monteclaro Manalo from St. Louis. Hello, Yusek Perez. Good afternoon, sir. Doc GP.
Good afternoon, Joyce, and to my fellow resource person, Dr. Bernadette, and of course, to everyone in this Zoom meeting. Magandang hapon, maayong hapon, maupay nga kulop.
Sir, ano po bang nangyari? What happened?
Well, what happened was early in the pandemic, around March or April 2020, a Lancet article came out that predicted that in many places of the world, family planning services and reproductive health services would be affected by the pandemic. And using this scenario, they predicted that there would be greater, because of the lockdowns and the difficulty of providing health services, including family planning, that in general, women would go without family planning, and that would lead to greater number of course, maternal mortalities due to increased childbearing, lack of health services, also overall, a lot of unwanted pregnancies because you cannot get your pills or your family planning supplies. And based on this analysis, UP Population Institute came up with a prediction that the population would go up by 750,000 if we had 9.5 months of lockdown in 2020. And that prediction would hold true this year, last year, sorry, 2021. So it was not because of people being together at home. It was not because of close proximity.
Pero,
The basis
Doc
for
GP,
the
sorry
prediction was the lack
Isingit,
of services.
Doc GP, sisingit lang ako. There was actually a comment in our Facebook thread even before we started. And one of them from Business Mirror, Stella Arnaldo, she said that, you know, baka people get so tired of each other because they see each other at home every day. That's why it wasn't conducive for procreating.
Another thing we were afraid of was actually increasing domestic violence. No? And that is because domestic violence is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you're not together for part of the time. But if you're always together with your abuser, there would be increased incidence of domestic violence, in particularly affecting women and children. So those were the two things that we were afraid of early on. However, by November in 2020, we conducted a survey with SWS, and we came out with this already, the results of this back in late 2020, that in November 2020, women were afraid of one thing, that was unplanned pregnancies. They did not want to become pregnant during a pandemic and during an economic crisis. And that was true for around 70% of women, afraid of either their own unplanned pregnancy or teen pregnancy as an issue that they were also looking at as a potential problem. The second most important problem of women was violence. No? And the third was lack of access to family planning and health services in general. So because of that, we had to rethink our projection of increased population. We were fortunate in, number one, having a census done in 2020, which showed that the population was 109 million. Second, we had also PSA reporting during the year the deaths and births. So what we have been doing is doing a calculation on the natural increase of population. That means take the number of births in a year, you take out the number of deaths, and you have a natural increase. And that's a fairly accurate method. That's what China and the US are doing now. That's why they're able to say, oh, our population only grew by this much. And in 2020, what we saw was that there were 1.5 million births in the Philippines, which was lower by around 150,000 than the previous year. Unfortunately, there were 608,000 deaths. So putting them together, you have 900,000 more or less Filipinos added in 2020. The other factor we should be looking at is migration. And in the Philippines, it's negative. Around 100,000 Filipinos leave the country every year. We do not have the numbers during the pandemic, but migration is a negative factor. So it could have been lower if more as more people migrated. Um, the turning point for much lower population growth came in when PSA reported the births and deaths up to September of 2021. And it showed that we were on track to have only 1.1 million or less births last year. And the number of mortalities already in September was 600,000. So we think there will be probably 700,000 or more, even more mortalities.
That's
Put
the
them to
lowest, sir, in how many
That's the
years?
highest.
Uh,
The mortality is
no,
the
I mean
highest that we've
the
ever had.
population growth rate is the slowest in almost
75
seven
years.
decades. 75 years. Wow.
Yeah, so last year our population grew by only 300,000 or below 400,000. The last time we had that kind of population growth was in the post-war era of World War II, 1946, 1947. We have been consistently adding more than 1 million to the population every year. So this is a unique situation, we believe, that is very much influenced by the fact that also we have fewer people getting married. From 440,000 marriages in 2019, it was down to 240,000 in 2020. I think for 2021, marriages probably went up a bit, but still far lower than 440,000. So people are not getting married. Women are opting not to have children during this time when you have a health as well as an economic crisis. So those are decisions that women, couples are making during a unique period of time.
Doc GP, balikan kita ha. Gusto ko lang puntahan
Yep.
si Dr. Babes. Ma'am, bakit ganoon ang nangyari? Hello ma'am, good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Joyce and
medyo maano lang yung connection ni Dr. Babes, ano? Baka mahina lang ng konti.
hapon sa inyo. Good.
Ayan. Is that better, ma'am?
All right. Let me check. Is it better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This one's better.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, I was amazed by even here with US and the rest of the other countries. There are really problems with that, no? And it's not only here in the Philippines. Nakita ko even in China, no? The growth rate falls to 61 year low. And also in South Korea, population falls for the first time in its history. And US's lowest population growth rate in a century as births decline. So wow, that's pretty amazing.
Bakit po ganoon? Is there something
Yes, Joyce.
Is there a psychological or explanation? Are people more afraid because the times are uncertain? Is it physical because you're afraid probably to pass on the virus to your loved one at home? Sabi ni Doc GP, fewer people are getting married, fewer women are getting pregnant. Ano po ba yun? Is it and it's not something that's isolated for Philippines lang, ano? It's something that's true across other nations as well. So is it that a fear of the unknown, a fear of the uncertain?
Yeah, actually. I'll go first with the study, Joyce. There's a study in Harvard University when it started last year that struck me. It mentioned there that there would be an upsurge during this pandemic of cases of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, at sinabi GP kanina na domestic violence. Trauma,
We'll try to come back to Dr. Babes. Medyo may problema ang kanyang internet connection lang. But Doc GP, she was mentioning trauma, anxiety, feeling of being uncertain about things. Yun po rin ba ang nakita ng POPCOM as possible reasons for the declining in the population growth rate natin?
I think Dr. Babes was talking about studies about increase in violence during lockdowns and during quarantine periods, and that's also what we expected here in the Philippines. We worked together with the Commission on Women, DOH, the SWD, and the ILG to keep the hotlines open to make sure that women could still report incidents of violence. In some areas, the system was not working because people are more doing other things. So I think there were a few incidents that we heard where they could not report to anyone about violence. Overall, the picture that came out for 2020 was that there was a reduction in reports of violence. And that is something we're still looking at. We feel that what may have happened is because of the loss of mobility of women, and coming from home reporting an incident is far more difficult in this situation. Also, on the other side, the people getting the reports may not have been there to get all the reports. So it bears further study. But the reports we have are lower numbers of violence. I'd like to add also to what I said that women are not getting married, postponing family starts. Probably people are not living in as much as well, because we have the mode of starting a family in the Philippines is just by living in. It's not marriage anymore. More people just live in than get married. So that's been a change in behavior since.
So now they're afraid because there's
living
a
in
disease.
And getting married. There's much less of that, I presume. But one thing that I'd like to add also is that we were afraid family planning services would fail.
Yeah.
But we saw, based on the reports from DOH and our own reports, that family planning increased by 500,000 people in 2020. And it continues to increase this year. Last year, we are running out in some areas of pills, condoms, so we have to keep the supply up. So family planning has increased during the pandemic. So 8 million women are now using family planning methods that are modern.
That's a good thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
That's a good thing. And it's been increasing for the last few years. So that's what we've seen. Those are the factors that affected this decline. But maybe Dr. Babes, I think she's
Dr.
back.
Babes, are you?
She can add something.
I think I saw her, but then
she dropped out again.
Oh, nawala ulit. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm very curious kami what makes the psychological makeup of it all. What makes someone hesitate from starting a family or procreating, having a baby? While waiting for Dr. Babes to come back, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Francis Angelo from the Daily Guardians is with us. Amalia Cabusa, also Ariel is also with us from Mindanao Times, and our trustee, of course. And natuwa ako, we have someone from the Siquijor Provincial Health Office. Mr. Hilmer Onge is also with us, joining us today. Maayong hapon from Francis, yes. So, Doc GP, balikan po natin. Apart from the lower I think Dr. Babes is already here.
Yeah, I changed my
Ayan, ma'am.
I changed my Wi-Fi connections. Is this
Better
better?
po. Ma'am, ito po. Ano po ba ang may psychological reason po ba why people under a pandemic, under also an economic uncertainty, would hesitate from having a baby?
Wow, that's a very good question and difficult to to answer, Joyce. One thing that I have noticed, since the families, di ba, sama-sama sila sa bahay. And the intimacy lesson, kasi nga, most of the children are around, at nakikita naman natin, di ba, ang structure ng bahay, parang isa lang yata ang kwarto, tapos lahat sila nandun. No? So I was thinking the intimacy was lessened because of the fact that people are in the house 24/7. That's one.
It's not conducive.
parang ako ba ay in the mood to do that?
Panira ng mood.
Parang ang liit pa ng banyo if you wanted to do something, di ba? Parang, of course, you have to set your mood when you wanted to,
And all the kids are there. And you have to support them sa online learning.
Exactly. And how can you do something where isa pang factor which I really noticed, children really stayed up late at night. Especially your teenagers. Sino bang mga teenagers dito na alas 3 natutulog or alas 4 natutulog? So where's the intimacy there? If you are, a couple, and then each rooms were occupied by laptops and computers, and parang setting the mood is actually one of the issues there because everyone is in the house. Okay. And then when you go out naman to have something, puno naman ng mga inns and motels with the people who are in quarantine.
Or if you go to the motel, you have to undergo antigen just to do something there.
Joyce, pang spur of the moment that you do before you couldn't do it anymore. Diba? Nakakawalang gana, Doc GP. So, yun ang nakikita kong mga issues na children and the children are, into online learnings and they stay up late at night and they connect with their friends, no? While parents, paggabi, ano gagawin? Pagod na. And since it's in the house lang, so parang how could you compartmentalize one house with one room? I think that's one factor, I believe, no? That setting the mood is not there. Second, since you are in the house most of the time, I was thinking na parang nawawala din yung excitement because of the fact that you're always together. And not only that, at times, di ba, sabi nga nila, a little distance can actually help in a relationship because alam mo yan, yung parang nandun yung namimiss mo isa't isa, but this one hindi na eh. And not only that, there are a lot of unresolved conflicts that may arise in the house. Hindi kayo magkasama palagi eh. So that's the reason why, oh my God, ganito pala, ganyan. So that's the only thing na parang naalala mo ngayon na, oh nga no, ganito mga issues namin. And then fights became more frequent kasi nga may mga bagay-bagay na the distribution of responsibilities is there, financial or economic problems are there, or the decline in the status of the finances is really a big factor, Joyce. No? And not only that,
sabi po nila,
yes,
parang if there is economic uncertainty, the tendency of people is not to have babies because they're also afraid para how can they support their children. So kasama po ba yun? Is that a factor here?
Yeah. The mindset is that kung wala akong pera, kung magkakaroon ako ng anak, how can I take care of that? I've seen a lot of young, the millennials who are tama si Doc GP madami lang nag-live-in na lang without any, marriages because they think and believe that it is more economical. Second, they really delay. They delay the time that they will get pregnant. And I think with that, maganda siya in the sense that preparation for adulthood or preparation for that chapter in your life wherein you have to be responsible is good. But at the same time, Joyce, nakikita din natin na parang mataas ang anxiety and depression, and that's the reason why they don't want to be intimate with their partners, or nawawala yung essence, no, at times of the intimacy, because they have problems with baka magkaroon sila ng COVID, ano na mangyayari sa kanila, nababakunahan ba, a lot of factors that really prevent, no, the couple from having the concept of having a child.
Doc GP, thank you, Dr. Babes. Doc GP, balikan ko lang po yung sinabi nyo about possible increase in domestic violence, but these remain underreported. So maliban sa population growth issue natin, the pandemic also spawned that kind of situation, where less women are able to report domestic abuse. Ano po mga naging anong interventions ang ginawa ng government to address this?
Well, the Department of Health and DSWD in particular opened up hotlines, or places where people could report directly issues on domestic violence. If the barangay or municipal desks of the police or social welfare or even health were closed, we got the information also that people are hesitant to health centers, or because andun lahat ng may sakit. People could not get to health centers because there was a time when you could not back ride on a motorcycle. No, and women generally have to get a ride somehow. So all of those things led to lower reporting of these incidents. No? And the hotlines that we have reported both incidents of violence and all, but still the numbers that we are getting are lower. There might be a hesitance in the population, among the population, to report this. No? We also noted that among in many areas, people are also saying it's more costly to have a baby, for example, because you have to pay for the PPE, and then many facilities were. They require you have to pay for the PPE, I think 500 or more pesos every time someone comes to see you. And people know that every time you have another baby, you use up your savings. No? Pre-COVID, it was known that a new baby coming in would lead you to spend 1/3 of your savings, if you have savings.
Ang laki naman, sir.
Otherwise, yes, that is the cost of for coming in with a new baby in terms of healthcare, in terms of additional other costs in the house. Also, I'd like to add to what Dr. Babes talked about housing being a problem. 1/3 of the houses in Metro Manila are smaller than 20 square meters.
Oh my gosh,
So
that makes it virtually impossible. Yeah.
Is 2 pool tables together. So if you're all together there, it's really difficult to get the intimacy and other things, to get the mood right and everything. And so housing is another problem for our people, in that houses tend to be smaller in congested communities. So we have a high number of densely populated barangays in cities and other areas. Of course, it's different in rural areas. Now, there are probably other opportunities there for that. But in cities, it's really more difficult to do that. So those are additional factors that we saw that led to the current situation.
Doc GP, I have a question, just a follow-up. Ano po ba ang long-term impact when your population declines? Are there studies that show that there's concrete effect or impact on, for example, a country's performance where population is declining? Kasi some analysts are saying that this population decline worldwide is a ruinous legacy of the crisis of the pandemic, And they're also saying that, Some are saying, maybe after 1 or 2 years, there will be a baby boom because after the pandemic is over, etc., etc. But some analysts are also arguing that, when a couple chooses to defer having a child, they don't typically make it up later. The unborn child remains unborn. Ano pong tingin ng Popcom doon?
Well, basically, in the Philippines, I'd like to say that there is no population decline. The population continues to increase year on year. Last year, in 2020, it was 900,000. In 2021, we're seeing between 300 and 400,000 increase. This year, in 2022, we think the increase will be around 600,000. So it's difficult to say whether this will be something that will be continued post-pandemic. Our view is that it will probably stabilize at around 1 million or less additional Filipinos every year. And we believe that is a situation that will continue even beyond the pandemic because of the economic crisis. Secretary Chua and the others have been saying that the economic crisis will take far longer than the health problem. No, the scars that have been, that our economy has had to bear will continue. Education will continue to have problems. So they're saying maybe 5 to 10 years. So we believe that people will continue to be more prudent about having increased number of children, but not to the extent of a population decline. We believe that all the surveys that we have seen in the past show that couples want 2 children at least. And that is probably a number that people will settle on. It might be for some couples less than 2. In NCR, actually, the fertility rate is now below 2. But everywhere else outside of NCR is higher than 2. So we believe people will settle on having 2 children or a little less, no? And that will lead to a demographic transition that will lead to greater economic benefits for the population within the next 5 years. No? But we have to, work on getting out of COVID and improving the situation of our people. We noted when PSA released the poverty statistics for 2021, 860,000 Filipinos became poorer. 861,000 families became poorer. But we noted also that 160,000 families got better. And that happened in the areas where there was no COVID or very little
these are
COVID.
outside Metro Manila, sir. The ones that got out of poverty line.
This was actually in the Barm area, surprisingly. Wow. And Lanao del Sur, which was the poorest province with 68% poverty before COVID, is now the number 9 in terms of the lowest number of poor families, only 20,000. So they went from 68% poverty to 11%. So they lifted 100,000 families out of poverty in the last 2 years. So I think the light at the end of the tunnel is, if there is no COVID, there is an opportunity for people's lives to get better. And COVID has really had a poverty-creating effect, particularly in the cost of living in areas like Central Luzon, Region 4. But the greatest number of poor, creation of poverty, I think, was in Region 7.
Visayas.
Yes, the Visayas, and also in Region 3. These were the areas also where you had over 1,000 deaths from COVID. So COVID and poverty tend to come together. and affect the lives of people. So this is something that we also need to address, no? There probably are some good things that were done by the local government, the regional government in BARM. I asked them about it, and they said, "Oh, probably in Lanao del Sur, you have a lot of projects, no? Marawi is there, a lot of build projects. There's a lot of funding going to BARM because of the peace agreement." So I think if government pays attention, if local governments, really bring down development to the communities, create local projects, that will lead to improved lives. But still, um, BARM is still the poorest region in the country, but things are looking up in Lanao del Sur. However, Sulu is now the poorest province in the Philippines with 78% poverty. So it's, in BARM, you have the province that has gotten ahead of poverty, but you also now have the poorest. So I think it's very important, the role of governance, improved governance, the role of actually peace. Peace is an important poverty reducing effort also, with BARM being more peaceful now than before.
Thank you, Doc GP. Dr. Babes, because Doc GP mentioned the economic or the financial aspect, and how it impacts on people's decisions and the status as well. How about the mental well-being? Kung ang economic impact 5 to 10 years, may estimate po ba tayo in terms of the mental health of people? Gaano katagal po ba yung impact nitong pandemic, and how will this affect their choices in, starting a family, getting married, having their own babies, etc.?
As long as there is the COVID pandemic at the moment, the upsurge of psychiatric issues are there. I have noticed also, Joyce, na parang mas madami akong pasyente at the present time seeking consult because of anxiety and depression. Astonishingly, some of them are also getting younger. Yung mga nag-online learnings, no? I think the psychosocial impact on the millennials and the children are very high. And also with the couples as well. So, parang ang daming roles that the parents has to do in the house. I think that is also one factor why there is also a decrease in the growth rate, because of the fact that parents assume different roles. So, pagod na sila pagdating ng gabi, no? So, wala nang energy. The mother, previously, who is a worker, would have to deal with being a yaya, being a teacher, di ba? Tapos, tuturuan pa yung mga anak, no? Especially those in the elementary years. And also, the husband will have to do also a lot of things in the house, no? So, doing, some repairs in the house or decluttering, and that can actually create a big impact. So, ang tanong mo kung gaano katagal, I think as long as there is the COVID pandemic right now and it's still going on, that psychiatric issues are there to stay, and that can also, affect the intimacy of the couple, and not only the intimacy but also the concept of kaya ba nila to? There is also the existence of burnouts, no? Stress in hurdling, the COVID pandemic. And I think the COVID really affected, the mental capacity, not only of the couples but also the family as well.
Doc GP, very quickly lang, before we go to the Q&A, kasi marami na pong naka-line up ng mga questions from our audience. Nung po bang Asian financial crisis, did we see a similar pattern? Kasi that was also a period of great uncertainty for people in this part of the world.
If you're referring to 19
97, 98,
97,
yes.
98. That was an era when we were having high population growth.
Oh.
No. I think the period between 1990 up to 2010, that was the area where those were the years, the decades when our population really went up to 90 million. Actually, we keep comparing ourselves to Thailand. In 1969, our population with Thailand was about the same at I think 37 million. Today, Thailand is at 67 million and we are at 109 million. Thailand, achieved what we call reduced fertility in 2000, around the time that there was a financial crisis. But during that time, we continued with our increased fertility up to around 2011, 2012. I think the highest fertility we had was around 2012. So that crisis did not have the same effect as this pandemic, I think, because probably other sectors were more affected during that time than during this pandemic when virtually everyone is affected. I mean, all social and income levels are affected by the pandemic, plus an economic crisis where people are both unemployed and underemployed.
And thanks, Doc GP. We'll go to our questions now. I'd like to call first Mr. Alex Pal of Metropost and a trustee of the PPI for his first question. Sir Alex.
Yes, okay. Maririnig ba?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yeah, I think, well, it's not so much of a question, but it's also, siguro marami rin nawalan ng trabaho. Many people lost their jobs and they probably are worrying where to get money for the next meal. What makes it so romantic, I thought.
Oo nga, Sir Alex, parang isa yun sa mga main concerns ng tao. Tama ba, Dr. Babes?
Actually, totoo yan, ano?
Actually, yung title natin hinggil sa pagpipigil ng panggigigil. I think maraming nagpigil ng panggigigil kasi unahin mo muna yung kakainin mo bago...
Parang Joyce, gigigil ka pa pag may pagkain.
Kagigil sa galit yung mangyayari sa mga mag-asawa.
Oo nga parang gigil sa galit o gigil ka sa gutom or gigil kung anong mga present problems that are arising in the family. So as they've said, the sexual intimacy is being taken aside because there are a lot of issues that you have to deal with. Kasi alam mo, sino ba naman ang nakakaalam na magti 3 years na tayong ganito, di ba? So for me, Joyce, kasi there are more important things that we have to tackle. And the sexual intimacy is being set aside. So, hinahayaan mo na yung panggigigil. Ang panggigigil para makapagkaroon na ka ng pagkain, araw-araw, may trabaho ka.
Yes.
Iba, hindi ka magka-COVID. Tapos,
safe.
Hindi lang yun, Joyce. Alam mo, malaki din ang impact na kapag may nagka-COVID sa family.
Oh, yeah.
And now you see the upsurge, di ba? So, mas madaming natatakot. Okay, so the fear, the anxiety, the problems that are arising in the family way more than the sexual intimacy.
Actually, Doc Bernadette, I remember, and I think Ariel would back me up on this. We had a previous forum with DOH Undersecretary Vergere. She attended the forum. And then parang we asked her na, paano yun? How can you be parang physically intimate when you come from outside and then you have to wash yourselves, make sure you disinfect, etc., etc. Parang ang daming process bago ka pa umabot dun sa point na, tara na sa kwarto or wherever.
Joyce, the spur of the moment is gone.
Yes.
There's always the fear na baka nakapag-contaminate ako ng COVID sa labas.
And
so,
we're talking about
ceremonias.
We're talking about couples with sharing the same home. Kung hindi pa parehas ang bahay ninyo, kung hindi pa kayo kasal or living in, parang teka muna, give me your RT-PCR test first before we do anything, di ba?
There is always
antigen test first, yeah.
The doubt, the fear, na baka, sandali lang sa kagaling, di ba? Don't touch me, no? Don't touch me not. Yun ang mga issues that you have to deal with. Minsan nakakawalang gana na, sige na nga, huwag na nga, tulog na lang. Di ba? Ganun, something like that. Plus the fact na yung kwarto mo, lahat kayo nandun, it's gone.
I'd like to call ma'am at this point, Miss Ami Cabusao from Mindanao Times for her question. Another trustee of PPI. Ami. Naka-mute pa, ma'am.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi. Yeah, I would just like to know yung may sinabi kasi si Julie about yung sa COVID, yung sa Lanao na mas maraming may yung problema sa COVID. If you don't even know kung ano yung figures na ilan ba talaga yung COVID, tas ano man yung nangyayari. Do you have figures on that, sir? Yung about yung birth rate ng Lanao del Sur, and then yung COVID na ano nila figures.
Yes. In 2020, the number of deaths from COVID in BARM, the entire BARM region was 80. This is based on the statistics released by PSA. So you have a region where you have very low COVID. And I also noted that, people are really doubting why Lanao del Sur has lifted so many people out of poverty. And I really asked national statistician Dennis Mapa about because it's all coming from them. I'm not making up the data. And I asked them, is it true that Lanao is now no longer the poorest province in the Philippines? That so many people have been lifted out of poverty? And he verified to me, yes, they rechecked the data. The reason why things are so much better in BARM is that the cost of living has increased by only 500 pesos within the last 3 years, while you have other regions increasing cost of living by 5,000 to 7,000. So the level of poverty to remain above poverty has remained low in BARM. So you have a low bar, and you have a lot of government resources going into the region, particularly in Lanao del Sur, where you have these projects on build. I was also told that a lot of people retired from the regional government in the transition, and they were given good packages. So I believe something happened in those provinces of Lanao del Sur, Basilan, and I think Maguindanao, where poverty went down. And it was a mix of lower cost of living, almost no COVID, and as I said, increased resources being spent in the area by government. Whether it will last, I don't know. But paradoxically, as I said, in the same region, you have Sulu with 78% poverty. No, parang nalipat in another province yung issue ng poverty. Whereas everywhere else, where COVID was bad, poverty also increased. So there was that link that we established. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that's Julia Hipala. I think that's one
really
worth pursuing. No, this is a very interesting fact.
About birth
all interrelated, ano?
Yeah, we have now the lowest birth based on the 2021 birth data of PSA. The lowest number of births are in BARM with around 12,000 in the first 6 months of 2021. Another area where you have low birth is in Cordillera with around 13,000 in the first 6 months. And the highest births are seen in Calabarzon, 105,000. These numbers are actually very low. much lower than we were expecting in 2021. NCR had 88,000 births. So they're all much lower than what they were in 2020. So the decline is something that is continuing, but we think we'll still have around an increase of 600,000 at the end, when all the data is in for 2021. 300,000 for 2021. This year, it might be
600
around
plus.
600,000, but that's a prediction. We need to verify with PSA.
Interesting yung BARM example, ano? Lowest, highest growth rate, tumaas ang population of people who were able to get out of the poverty threshold, and mababa yung cases nila. COVID deaths.
Death, I did not look at the cases, just the COVID
for the
deaths.
COVID deaths. Baka interrelated din yung factors na yun.
Deaths are 2% usually of COVID cases. So, well, you have to make the math there.
Yeah. Tapos, factor din siguro yung culture. We don't know when they doing para things like that. So,
something that journalists can pursue, or our colleagues from Mindanao will be interested to look into this.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, we'll try to look into that.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Ma'am Ami. Balikan natin si Miss Julie. Meron po siyang ibang questions for Doc JP.
Yes.
Anong age group daw po ang may mataas na population? And because given the pandemic, we saw a number of senior citizens and those with comorbidities dying. May record po ba kayo? Ano pong age group, sir?
Well, PSA has not yet released the age group, by birth. No, but 63% of the population is in the working age group. That is between 15 to 65. So much of our population is of working age, but not all of them are working. Actually, the situation now is we have in some regions much more consumers than workers, and that's a situation in BARM, no, where paradoxically we have poverty reduction, but pag tingnan mo yung workers, actually in BARM only 25% of the population is working, 75% are consumers. So in BARM, if you have a family of 4, you probably need 4 or 5, because the average is around that. You need 4 jobs to stay afloat. In NCR, enough na yung 2 jobs, nakakapang-ipon ka pa. Now, so that means the age group, yung working age group, is the one that's growing. The senior citizens are still growing in number. Actually, UP Population Institute has said the fastest growing part of the population are the seniors. With the deaths from COVID, I don't think it'll make much of a dent, no, because although UPPI has said that 55 and above, in terms of age, that is where you have a lot of mortalities. But right now, the mortality from COVID is less than 100,000 for the last 2 years. No, I think last year it was 50,000. No, it's probably, it was 50,000 last year. This year, because I haven't seen the cutoff from PSA has said that there are probably around 70,000 deaths this year. Which is 1 in 10 deaths in the Philippines is because of COVID. And a lot of them are seniors, but still those numbers are not that large.
Okay, sir, thank you. Ariel, are you raising your hand? Or no? Were you raising your hand? Sorry. Okay, sorry. I thought you were. Ayan. We have a few more questions, sir, from AC Nichols of CNN. Maybe Dr. Babes would also like to share your insights on this. Ang slow population growth po ba, although this was addressed a bit earlier, you'd like to expound on this? Is this a good news or bad news for a country like the Philippines?
Sino mauna? Si Doc JP.
I thought it was for Dr. Bates. What was the question again,
Ay,
Joyce?
dalawa naman po.
Sige, Doc,
Okay.
kayo muna.
What was the question again?
The question of AC Nichols is, yung slow population growth po ba natin, is that good news or bad news for a country like the Philippines? Given our demographics, our economic situation, etc.
Actually, that is good news for us because all the factors there, increased family planning use leading to lower population, which is actually what we were working for. But around 2025 was when we thought that would happen. I think the COVID situation and the economic crisis have brought it on much earlier. I think for us, what we would like to see is that the slower population growth, but not negative. We don't want negative population growth. Should be sustained even beyond the pandemic. And we have every reason to believe that our population will continue to slow down because that's been what we've seen in the last 20 years. No? Particularly in the last decade, women are choosing to have fewer children, education, more as education improves and as people participate in the labor force more, people are seeing the benefit from smaller families. We hope that continues over time, but we are not going to impose anything mandatory. We are not going to force anyone to have 2 children or less. That's still, based on our RH law, that is a matter of an individual choice and all voluntary. What we are doing is just helping people attain their aspirations to have smaller families. And that is action that has been pushed by COVID, but we hope people stay on that track beyond COVID.
Yeah. Joyce, on my part.
Yes, po.
On my part, Joyce, I'm having two answers. Yes, kasi you can see that responsible parenthood is there and that you can easily take care of a small family. But the tip of the iceberg is ano nangyari, okay? Mentally ba, psychologically, does it correlates, di ba? Na mababa ba ang population right now? Does it entail that, do they understand it? Or baka after ng pandemic, upsurge na naman ng growth rate natin or population rate. Kasi wala na yung fear. So
parang,
for me,
kung may revenge travel, may revenge baby boom then after the pandemic.
That is what I was thinking about. Kasi talaga, I saw the data almost lahat ng countries that have studies on that have lower population rate. Now, I was thinking baka mamaya, pag mawala na yung pandemic, upsurge na naman ng birth rate. Sana matuloy nga, sabi nga ni Doc GP. But at the same time, I'm just worried it might be just the tip of the iceberg na because of the fear, anxiety, and depression, the population rate is low.
Yeah, I'd like to give some assurance to Dr. Bates. No? The last time we had a baby boom was after World War II. No, the period 1945 to 1960 and beyond. Some of us were probably part of that baby boom. We had a 3% growth rate. However, family planning as a program only started in the Philippines in 1969.
Okay.
So it was not there in time for the baby boom.
Yes.
But now, if we have, if that things is something that might be on the horizon, at least we have a family planning program and many methods to choose from for our couples. So I believe just sustain the program and let people choose.
Yes. I
Vote
think, Doc,
with their,
I think, Doc, that also gives me a thought. Madaming mga millennials, they know how hard it is or how hard life is. So nakita ko mas iba yung focus nila . Ang focus nila is to really be stable financially at parang kaya pa nila mag-live-in muna, not have a child, just be financially independent. And I think that works, no? And that's a good thing, Doc, kasi active tayo with that. And hopefully, kasi Doc, nakikita ko, di ba, there's the increase of the millennials, number of millennials or young adults now. So ang hindi katulad sa panahon natin na parang wala pa siya masyadong family planning, planting pa lang. So parang nakita na si Joyce natatawa, no? Totoo yan, Joyce. Okay, so ngayon naman, adult
first time ko marinig yung family planting. Meron palang concept yan.
Joyce, uso yung panahon namin.
Yes, may ganon.
Bata pa kasi si Joyce.
Bata pa kasi si Joyce. Sige, Joyce. Yung mga, namin. Ayun ang mga jokes namin before pag mamatay na yung ilaw. There you go. Diba? Yun yung mga jokes namin before. So, Joyce, mas bata ka pa kaysa sa amin talaga.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Doc GP. We have our last two questions. From Oriel Kilinging from Mindanao today. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. For Yusek Perez, do we have cases of unreported or unregistered births and deaths? And has this affected the population count? He asks because of the travel restrictions and the mobility curbs, baka hindi nare-report.
Yes, actually, that is a problem in our statistical system, yung underreporting. But before COVID came in, the level of underreporting was less than 10%. So if there's a margin of error, it will be 10% or less. What we have seen with COVID is much more late reporting. Nalilate ang pagbigay ng data. It's probably because of the problem of mobility, etc. Nalilate silang. But there is, I agree, a level of underreporting, lalo na sa mga areas na tinatawag naming isolated and disadvantaged areas, mga IT communities. So you have a lower level of reporting there, but it's probably less than 10%.
Thank you, sir. Our last question, medyo mabigat itong tanong po niya. Na tiyempo panghuli from Miss Lou Tangi, the chairperson of the Department of Journalism of the University of the Philippines, CMC. Either resource speaker could answer. Are you aware of an increase in abortion because of the pandemic? This might actually require a separate RTD, but please, Doc GP, Dr. Babes.
Yes, abortions are not officially reported but in our system. So we have no way of knowing whether there's an increase in abortions. An offshoot of people resorting to abortion is maternal mortality increasing. And we have noted that maternal mortality before COVID was around 2,000 maternal mortality going down. So I have to look at the PSA data on maternal mortality, but it's probably with the lower number of births, it will probably be lower as well. So I would imagine abortions have probably also been less. There's been less of that during this period with less than last year with around just 1 million births. The number of abortions was probably in the tens of thousands, but I really cannot predict because it's not presumed because it's not really reported in the system. People in hospital are probably going to see the consequences of abortion, meaning yung dinudugo, dumating sa hospital and all.
Something that the DOH should actually consider.
DOH may have
we
that.
Cannot know what we cannot measure. And abortion is something we are not measuring as a statistic in our country.
Right now, no. Yes, because it's illegal and we only see the consequences.
You also have to see what type of abortions we are dealing with.
Yes.
Ano ba to? Self-induced ba to? Or dahil ba sa COVID, nagkaroon siya ng abortion? So there are different types of abortion kasi, Joyce. So we really cannot label. Meron mga nagpupunta sa mga ibang non-medical na nagpapa-abort but as is underreported kasi nga wala nga tayong statistical data. thinking on the psychological aspect of of abortion, I was thinking that some perhaps may do a self-induced abortion when they think that they got pregnant and they could not afford a baby, or like for example in a relationship wherein they're not ready to be parents. Okay? So self-induced lang pinag-uusapan natin. There's also an abortion wherein it is due to a medical problem or due to a gynae problem, which of course we do not have that data. Now, whatever it is, actually the woman's reproductive system is actually very important in maintaining it to be healthy during the pandemic times. Importante talaga.
Ayun, maraming salamat po, Dr. Babes, Doc GP, to all who participated in our first roundtable discussion for the year for the Philippine Press Institute. Napakaganda po ng ating discussion, and I think it actually triggered a lot of other issues. And in a separate group chat, there were actually discussions about how the Mindanao-based reporters will actually pursue the BRR Bangsamoro angle that was discussed also earlier. So ayun, we'd like to thank all of our participants. Maraming salamat to our media colleagues who joined us today and asked their questions. Thank you so much. We'd like to thank also our partner, Seidel Foundation, for supporting us and all the activities of PPI that HSF is supporting. Maraming salamat kay Ariel, to our staff, everyone who made this RTD possible. And ahead of time, I'd like to invite you to join us in our next RTD, third Wednesday of the month. Hindi ko pa po alam yung topic for the next RTD, but it will be, I'm sure it will be as exciting as our discussion today. So, ayun po, kung wala na pong ibang tanong, at we will close the discussion now, Ariel.
Yeah, I think we have a few reminders. Well,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, from Carol. Si Carol usually speaks the last, no, for some reminder. Maraming salamat po sa ating speakers, ating guests natin, at sa trusty panelists natin, Joyce, from Dumaguete, tsaka sa Davao, si Ami, tsaka si Alex, and the other trustees will be joining us in our other roundtable discussions. Maraming salamat, HSF. Joyce, of course, busy si Joyce sa PPI activities. May kita niyo po siya ulit sa ibang activities ng PPI. There's one coming up 21 this Friday. There's 28 also. For the both are scholastic press outreach programs for educators and students. Tapos we have the first podcast taping and airing the last week of the month. Ayun, dami namin gagawin, and hopefully get to see everyone there. Carol is
here now,
Okay, sorry.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Joyce. I'm Caroline D. Of Seidel Foundation, and we just, aside from thanking, of course, our resource persons and participants, may we invite you to please participate in our online survey, which will help us have a better idea of how we can better conduct these activities and, of course, support future activities. Thank you very much.
It's posted on the chat.
It will be posted in the
chat. Yes.
Yes, the link will be posted in the chat box. So please fetch it from the chat box. It takes just a short time, but it will help us a lot. Thank you very much.
Joyce, sa ating viewers watching us via
Facebook
live streaming.
Yes.
Maraming yung hindi po nakapanood, we'll be posting this on the PPI YouTube YT channel ng PPI. So, ayun. At maraming salamat sa ating kasamahan sa media na nag-cover na participate as well. See you next time, everyone. At ingat po lagi tayo. Love ourselves, love other people too, and love God above all things. Thanks so much, Seidel Foundation. Maraming salamat sa ating technical at production team natin, Joyce. Thank you. See you next time. Ingat po. Bye-bye, Joyce.
Everyone.
See you Friday.
Thank you, everyone.
Medyo RET ng discussion ngayon.
Oo.
Thank
Pwedeng
you.
mag-part 2 tayo next time siguro.
Oo nga.
Yeah, oo. Kasi ito wala na to off the record. Si Joyce, si